It is said that happiness is a journey and not a destination. But how far would you go in search of happiness? Well, my guest today is Christopher Boyce, a former British academic who researched happiness for a decade. Then he realized he was not happy. He wanted to do something that felt more meaningful to him and deepen his understanding of happiness. He quit his academic job in 2017 to start a grand journey to Bhutan on a bicycle. He eventually arrived in Bhutan after 18 months. The journey took him to 25 countries, and he covered around 20,000 kilometers by bicycle. Along the way, he found a deep and enduring sense of happiness. When he got back to the UK, he wrote a book about the journey called A Journey for Happiness, The Man Who Cycled to Bhutan. He's also skeptical about the high happiness rankings of the Nordic countries, as he says there is a lot to praise about the Scandinavian missions, but that is not the whole picture. Today, I will talk to him about his research on happiness, his epic journey to Bhutan, and what's wrong with the high happiness rankings of the Nordic countries. Christopher, welcome to the program and thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mahmood. It's good to be here.
Thank you. So you researched happiness for a decade and you're a happiness expert. So my first question naturally to you would be, define happiness. How do you define it?
Yeah, I think, asking what happiness is a really good place to start, really, because I think one of the things that I've come across when I'm talking about happiness is that often people are talking cross purposes because they mean different things by happiness. It's not because they're wrong or anything like that. It's just there are different understandings of happiness. And I think sometimes happiness can be trivialized as just something, that's about an emotional feeling or something, but there is a deeper sense to it. And I think it's really good to make sure we're on the same page. And I'll probably come back to like the different types of happiness as we talk, but what I often get is that when most people talk about happiness, they think of it as a kind of feeling, like the kind of laughing, smiling type of happiness, which is about feelings in the moment. But then there's other types of happiness, which is if you like more happiness in the mind or thinking happiness. So like we might think of it in terms of evaluating our lives. When we sit back and we think about our lives and all the things we've done, do we feel good in terms of what we've done? And it can often be bound up with achievements and so on. And then you have like what I would call like a deeper sense of happiness, more fulfilling, which would be like a thriving or a human flourishing. And that's more tending towards, it's more kind of based in human needs. We need to feel optimistic. We need to feel like we've got nourishing relationships. We need to feel like we have purpose in our lives. And we need to generally feel like we're doing okay. So I think these kind of three different types of happiness are really important when we're talking about happiness. So the moment to moment happiness, if you like the evaluative type of happiness, which we might embody in things such as how satisfied are you with your life, and then the kind of deeper flourishing, thriving type of happiness. And then not to mention as well, and not to forget as well, you also have like the absence of negative feelings. So like, feeling angry, sad would generally, make someone not happy. So it's like absence of those feelings might be construed as happiness. And I think a really important thing to understand is that, moment to moment happiness feeling in the moment, it comes and goes. It's very difficult to have, and being happy all the time is kind of not realistic because stuff happens, which is really difficult. And, a natural response is a sadness or something like that. So yeah, we can deepen on these later, I think. Because I talk about that when I'm talking about Finnish happiness, which is, a really curious case.
Yeah, we will talk about it. So there are different types of happiness. Which one is more sustainable and fulfilling for human beings? And I also read your blogs. You wrote about hedonic well-being and also eudaimonic well-being. So if you can just tell me about those kind of happiness and what type of happiness is more sustainable.
Yeah, sure. The hedonic happiness is the moment to moment time, the laughing, smiling, right? And, we don't feel happy all the time. It comes and goes. There are things we can do that make us feel a little bit better, but eventually, it will go. Even just like our mood fluctuates during the day, it's just kind of a natural biological process. And that's like kind of hedonic moment to moment happiness. And the eudaimonic that you mentioned. So these are kind of Greek, ancient Greek kind of terms, which are kind of a little bit outdated in terms of like, oh, eudaimonic, what does that mean? But that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the human flourishing or thriving as a human being. And I guess that's more bedded in like having a meaningful purpose in life. So, for example, there's things we do which have a deeper meaning, which don't make us feel good. So, for example, like I can think of this podcast, for example, right? I feel a little bit anxious before I was doing it, and now, but I do it because actually it's a really meaningful thing for me to do. It's important. Also, just like in terms of connecting and relationships, that's also part of human flourishing. Self-esteem is a part of that human flourishing. And yeah, generally like being optimistic and hopeful for the future. And I think when we tap into those and we concentrate on thinking about what's purposeful for us, we think about connecting to other people, we can have sustained happiness, if you like. But we can also feel good about that as well. It's not absent of, feeling good about ourselves. But like I say, in the podcast example, like, feeling anxious, that's okay. It's a fairly normal response to this kind of thing. But I do it and it's, gives me meaning, and I connect to you and whoever else, that listens to this.
Yeah, I understand. So you had been a happiness researcher for many years, but ironically, you were not happy and you realized it. So when did you first realize that you were not happy and that you had to do something about it?
I don't know. But the thing is, when you're researching happiness, like, most of us know what is good for our happiness. But the question is, we don't know how to, A, we don't have the time, or B, we may know our relationships suck and we would like better relationships. But, it's not like there's anyone that's taught us to have good relationships. So it's like knowing all this information, and in some sense, I guess I was achieving the kind of thinking type of happiness, where I achieve something and I get a bit of a hit and feel good for a little bit, but then I have to achieve more and so on. Just we get caught up in that kind of race, that rat race, if you like, as society. And like what I really wanted to be doing, spending less time in front of a computer, I wanted to be chatting to people about happiness, or just generally, being relaxed a bit more. I wanted to be looking after my health a bit more, but because of the demands of the job, which is essentially, to publish papers, to get research funds, which is good. It's important. There's a meaning part of it. But I guess I kind of started questioning this research generally as to what good was it really doing anything. So I just lost purpose really. And kind of realized that there were probably better ways that I could fulfill myself, which led to a journey of epic proportions, which we're going to chat about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I understand. I understand.
Ironic, but it set me off. It was a good set off. It's a good setup for a journey and a book that takes someone to Bhutan, really.
Yeah, and the Bhutan, the country, the Himalayan country, that's in Asia. So yeah. I'm actually from Asia. So the Bhutan is actually near from my country than it is from yours.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very near. Like a stone's throw, no? And when I was cycling, I came this close to Bangladesh. So
yeah,
I'd love to have been there, but I did meet some Bangladeshis, and yeah, really, really, really positive, really nice people.
Oh yeah, I think so. We are happy, we are expressive, we are talkative, so we'll never feel bored when you talk to us. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So let's focus on your research, because you spend a lot of time, I think a decade or more than that, doing this research on happiness and life satisfaction and well-being. And most of your research has focused on the relationship between the economy and well-being. So how does economic growth relate to happiness? Because, it's an old debate, like, does money make us happy or does it not? So I want to know from you, because you have researched this as an academic. So how does economic growth relate to happiness? Does having more economic growth can make us happy?
Yeah, sometimes, but often not, basically. Economic growth is important up to a point. When there's poverty, when people aren't able to meet their basic material needs, it's really important, but a lot of countries have got to a point where they're growing and growing and growing. and it's not really making much of a difference to their feelings of well-being. So in a nutshell, it is important to some extent, but beyond a certain point, it's more or less immaterial. It may have some effect, but it's so very small that there's actually other things that are much more important when it comes to societal well-being, be it health, be it absence of corruption, be it generosity, trust, and these kind of factors, which in some ways economic growth can erode some of these things. So if people are working way longer, it's not good for their health. The economy may grow, but the sacrifices that are being made, and it's potentially by some people in the population and not others. So this idea of economic growth, it's kind of a little bit of a story we tell ourselves to keep ourselves going. We're going to grow, and it's all doom and gloom if a country slips into recession. But at least in UK, for example, we're well beyond the point where we can meet our population needs. It's also massively unequal, which means that some people are in very deprived situations and struggling. So we could do with a lot more equality, certainly, and that would raise well-being. But then there's also a sort of vested interest to have it that way, because then you have people who don't have much money struggling to catch up and trying to just make ends meet, which drives the economy, which people in positions of power kind of want because it serves them.
Yeah, exactly. And do you know the Easterlin paradox? I think you do.
Yeah,
the Easterlin paradox. So that kind of explains this thing. Like, even if you have more economic growth, after a certain point, no matter how much you grow, it will not directly affect your happiness and well-being. And I think there are also examples of countries where this has happened. Like, it has not actually touched or affected positively their levels of well-being, right?
Yeah, it's a classic finding. And Richard Easterlin, when he first came across it, explained it by being this relative comparison idea, is that basically once your basic material needs are met, it doesn't matter how much more you have, it matters how much more you have in comparison to other people. And I published on stuff this myself. So we just get am I doing better than the neighbors? So, and then the neighbors are thinking, am I doing better than Christopher? And you can just get this kind of like zero-sum game where we just keep striving, but no one really does any better off. So that was Richard Easterlin's explanation for that. But there's other explanations as well, such as the fact that generally we adapt to certain things, right? So you get a new thing, we might get an initial buzz, but that new thing a year later has no effect on our well-being. It's just a thing that we tuck into the corner of our home or something like that. It doesn't actually bring sustained well-being. It's just another thing. Okay, so it's a new couch that then we don't really care about, or it's a bigger TV, which after 3 months we don't even notice it's bigger. Or we just want a bigger one, so we're kind of permanently dissatisfied or something like that. And then there's the other thing as well, is that another explanation for it as well, which I also did research on, is that income gains don't really have that much benefit, but when we lose stuff, it really hurts us psychologically. So the big TV, for example, we don't even notice after 3 months there's a big TV. Right. But you take away that TV and you give someone like a small TV. I don't even have a TV, so I don't know why I'm choosing a TV. But if you take away that big TV, suddenly that small one is a lot more painful than the benefit was. Do you know what I mean? So it's like they feel like they're deprived, even though a year ago they were quite happy with the smaller TV, but they got the bigger one and they lost the bigger one, and then it's that small one just doesn't meet the need at all. So these sorts of things just basically basically lose all benefits of income gains, really.
Yeah, I understand. And also in one of your blog posts, I think you explained it in terms of losing a job. When a person loses a job, the dissatisfaction that he has is actually more about losing the meaning and purpose, because he had a meaning and purpose that was attached to his job. It's not about losing their monthly income or monthly wage, So you explained it in one of your posts.
Yeah, it's part of it. I mean, obviously, losing your wage is a big thing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's the thing that really the people really struggle with is just that lack of day-to-day social interaction, the lack of purpose in their lives. It's like, what do I do now? Um, you know, um, so it's. But then that's the thing is because unemployment is so bad. That's often used as a way to convince people that we need more growth because we got to grow because then jobs are created. But at the same time, you've got technology eroding jobs, right? And technology is generally owned by people who are in positions of power. So they finance that and they reap all the rewards from that. So they're benefiting from that, whilst other people are losing jobs. And then it's like, well, we got to keep growing, but it doesn't really serve the people, who are doing the graft. They're doing the work, and their jobs keep getting lost, whilst people, because it's a vastly unequal world, still keep taking the ownership and the profits from improved technology. So and technology has its benefits, but I mean, it doesn't beat. We can connect from people all over the world, but it doesn't beat having a face-to-face conversation with someone and actually, connecting on a deeper level, I think.
Yeah, I understand. So you have, as we have talked about this, like, does having more money buy happiness? So it's not always like that. So you have discussed some reasons in one of your articles why people still pursue higher incomes despite evidence that it doesn't actually contribute to greater happiness. So why is it? Is it like keeping up with the Joneses? So if my neighbor has more income, so I will also wish to have more income and I will actually pursue more income so that I can actually keep up with my neighbors. Is it that kind of feeling? Where does it come from?
Yeah, I mean, we want to do better than others. I think a lot of it's explained by just a mistaken belief. I mean, if you look at like the messages that we receive like daily, right? It's just like, if you buy this, your life will be better. And you can't live without this, you have to have this. So the natural assumption is, I need money to get all these things that I'm being told will make me happy. And that's basically what we have to go around the world seeing. So I think people think that money's going to buy them more happiness than it actually does, because when it comes to it, you get the new car, neighbors have got a car, also the car is like not as good as and pleasurable as you thought it was, and also like after 3 to 6 months it doesn't register as a new car anymore. It's just another thing that you have. So I think it's people overestimating how much happiness they'll get from it, which is not. It's partly a human psychological bias. Understandable. I mean, we do look. I mean, if you look in media, you look on in newspapers or like magazines, you see people, celebrities, rich people, and they're always smiling, and it's that we make that connection. It's like, oh, if only I had that lifestyle. But the reality is, they're just a human being, and they're just as anguished as anybody. They might distract themselves, and push that pain away or whatever it is with things, but ultimately it doesn't really soothe and nourish the soul on a deeper level, essentially. So yeah, yeah, I guess that was a lot of my frustration, is doing research into money and happiness and seeing, right, and I changed my beliefs through the research, right? I originally trained as an economist, and there you're told pretty much every single course you do that money is happiness. It equates to more happiness, and that's basically what the models are based on. So I guess when I started looking at happiness data and seeing how it linked to the economy, I was like, okay, it's really small, if at all, if existing at all. So why are we so caught up in this? And it took me quite a lot of years of lots of research to go, you know what, this is not where happiness is going to lie for me. So I started changing my life. right? And actually listening to that research. And I guess that's how I got to. I every time I do some research, I pump it out to the media and try and like explain that to people because it's really important. And yeah, people would be very cynical in response to that research. And, you know, kind of basically, I kind of felt like it's not really about evidence. You can get great stats, but you're basically using scientific evidence to wrestle with people's fundamental core beliefs. And a lot of those core beliefs we have about money, the economy, and our happiness have come before we could even walk and talk, right? So as soon as we're, you know, in nappies, you've got some kind of like messages being pumped into us about having more, doing this, that's going to be happiness. So by the time you can actually look at research and learn certain things, you've already got this deep ingrained belief in us that we have to, you know, overcome. And if we don't, then we just play that game and maybe we're not too happy as a result, which was what happened to me, I guess. I was just like, you know, this isn't really cutting it for me. I'm pretty sure there's more fulfillment out there. And it turned out there was. So it was a good choice, really.
Yeah, I understand. So let's talk about personality. In research, personality has been found to be a strong predictor of well-being. So tell me about that. What kind of personality is more conducive to having more happiness?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on personality. And I guess it's like, you know, it's the most stable and consistent predictor of someone's well-being, who they are and how they relate to the world around them. And that's not to say that doesn't change. The thing is, one of the papers we showed is that personality changes. So you can have different aspects of a person's personality. So, for example, there was a model I used to work with, which is like known as the Big Five model of personality. And that was basically saying that you have certain tendencies towards openness to the world, the tendency to be conscientious, extroverted, neurotic, and agreeable. And everyone has certain elements of these. And what we found is when we looked at how much that contributed to someone's, say, life satisfaction or happiness in the moment, it was a really strong predictor of their well-being. And also what we actually showed is that because traditionally people think personality is fixed, you can't really change it. Who we are is who we are. But actually what we showed is that personality does change quite substantially across the life cycle. But not only that, it's more likely to change and has more of a powerful effect than things that we spend a lot of our lives trying to change, such as our income, such as our relationships. So it's kind of like in terms of like happiness and the benefits that we can have, working on ourselves is a really important part of it. But obviously as well, you know, our personality is shaped by our environment as well. So for example, I was really conscientious because that was part of my job, but actually I think I worked too hard for too long, too many times. So it had a negative, detrimental effect on my well-being. And I probably would have, I see it now, I would have probably been a little bit better if I was a bit more laid back and said no a few times rather than, you know.
Yeah. I understand. So now let's talk about the Nordic nations. You were skeptical about the high happiness rankings of the Nordic nations. So I want to know from you why you think the high happiness rankings of the Nordic nations do you think it's kind of misleading?
I love the Nordic countries. I've never actually been. I've been to Denmark, but I haven't really explored deeply. And I wish my bicycle journey could have taken me there, but that wasn't the route I wanted to go. I wanted to go to Latin America, where some would say are happier places, depending on how you're looking at happiness. So I think like Finland, for example, and other Nordic countries have got a lot to inspire us when it comes to happiness. But I think when we hear about the happiness rankings each year, Finland always hits the top spot. And it's like, okay, that tells us a lot, but we don't actually look deeper into what sort of happiness is being talked about there. So for example, International Day of Happiness, you get the World Happiness Report. Finland is normally topped, and you get lots of media articles. And classically, in those media articles, oh, Finland, happiest again, and you'll probably have pictures of people laughing and smiling in the pictures, because that's what most people associate with happiness, right? But the thing is, with the Finnish happiness that they do really well at, is it's not the laughing, smiling kind of happiness.
Oh yeah, they are not. They always have a poker face. They never laugh. They never smile. So I know it.
Exactly. So the happiness in the World Happiness Report, the question that's asked there doesn't even mention happiness. What it does is it asks people to evaluate their lives. So it gets into a thinking type of happiness that I talked about earlier, the evaluative type of happiness. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But what it is it tends to be people that have achieved a lot that tend to do well at that, and countries also. So a country like Finland does really well at that because it's an affluent country and it meets its needs. And also what is really good about Nordic countries, why they do so well, is the level of equality. There's lots of trust in society and social support. And that's really important, which is why they outstrip countries like the UK or the USA, which, to be honest, do pretty badly because they're just unequal, and they're, only a few people were able to actually achieve certain things, So it's a measure of happiness which is based on an evaluation, based on achieving things. Whereas if you think about the laughing and smiling type of happiness, as you're saying there, that the Finnish don't really laugh and smile that much, as do a lot of other countries that do quite well on this type of happiness. But if you ask people how much they enjoy themselves in the day and how much they laugh and smile, then it's Latin American countries that outstrip the world, like quite substantially, right? So if you think about, I don't have the exact data for recent because it's like, but in the same poll, it's Gallup World data.
Gallup World poll.
And in the same poll, they also ask, how much did you enjoy yourself the day before? How much did you laugh and smile? Right. And I know from the data for 2018, for example, when Finland, I think it was the first year that Finland hit the top. Yeah. If you looked at how much they laugh and smile in Finland, there are at least 40 other countries that laugh and smile more than in Finland. So when it comes to laughing and smiling, it's Paraguay that outstrip, Mexico, Costa Rica, countries in Latin America that do so much better. It's not to say that the Finland does very badly, but it just doesn't do as well on that type of happiness. So what I think is you should include more types of happiness in that, because it's important to think we're doing well, but it's also important to feel good as well. So it needs to be a balance. And I'm not saying, Latin American countries are the happiest, because they're good at one type of happiness, but we should celebrate that as well, rather than having a very lopsided. So the Finnish type of happiness is a very lopsided notion of happiness, because there's other types of happiness. That's the kind of, they do well at life satisfaction. Okay, great. But do they laugh and smile each day? No. And you can look at this in terms of how we choose to live our lives. So when I was an academic, before I got really unhappy, I was quite satisfied with my life because I felt quite purposeful. The job felt good. But ultimately, my day-to-day was sitting in front of a computer. So I didn't really laugh and smile to myself in front of a computer. Versus someone else who might have a quite low-status job, but is in contact with people all day long. And they're actually laughing and smiling quite a lot. So when we're thinking about how do we want to live our lives, I think it's got to include a little bit of both. And I think it would be really nice to see something like the World Happiness Report actually have a more open, honest conversation around happiness and include other aspects of happiness. And I think the reason they possibly don't is that it doesn't, it's mostly edited by economists, some psychologists, and it's very lopsided in terms of who writes that report. And if the economists are mostly writing the report, they don't really. It's not they have a bias in terms of who's the better countries of the world, and they're obviously going to favour countries that are affluent. It doesn't say much about economists if suddenly realise that Latin American countries, which have medium-sized economies, At least some that do well have medium-sized economy, have a lot more social trust, do well. So I think it's like I'd like to see more of that, really. I don't know if any of
Yeah,
that made sense.
yeah, I understand.
You should read my book because it makes sense in my book. It makes sense in my book. I can tell you that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. But you know what? I can tell you, as we were talking about being expressive, like smiling or having positive feelings. So if that is the criteria to measure happiness, I can tell you is that not only Latin American countries, countries like Bangladesh, they will also rank highly because we are very expressive and we laugh a lot, we talk a lot. So I can tell you that we can also have, we have more positive experience, more positive. Of course, we have negative emotions as well, but we also have positive emotions and we express that easily. So we are not like Finns when you think about that aspect of happiness. But after living in Finland for 3 years, and as I grew up in Bangladesh, so my idea after going to Finland was that happiness, being happy or having happy feelings or positive emotions, it's a part of happiness. It's part of it, it defines how happy you are. But I think it's more important to have policies that can actually give you a safe and secure life. After I went to Finland and I lived there and I talked to Finns, I interviewed them and I had Finnish colleagues and Finnish friends, and I was studying Finnish happiness and the Finnish culture. So this is what I understood. You can have positive emotions, you can have a lot of it. But then if you don't have some kind of policies and support from the government or from the state, then your life is not very safe and secure. Like, we don't have unemployment allowance or benefits in Bangladesh. We don't have pension in Bangladesh. Only those who work for the government in the public service. So they have the pension, but people who work in the private sector, they don't have the pension. So people who do not have government jobs, they're always afraid of the uncertainty of the future. They think what they will do after they retire, or if they lose their job, what's going to happen. In Bangladesh, if you're working for the government, it's highly likely that you won't lose your job. So a government job comes with a lot of safety and security. But in the private sector, you have this problem. So my feeling is that in this aspect, Finland and other Nordic countries does really well because they have this, wide and comprehensive social safety net. So they have unemployment benefits and many different kinds of benefits, and the education is free, the healthcare is almost free. So when the government have this kind of policies, you can say they are social welfare countries, and of course they are. But if you have this kind of policy, I think it actually helps raise the level of life satisfaction of citizens. Because, as a Bangladeshi, I can tell you, I'm always afraid of losing my job. And I'm always afraid of what will happen if I lose my job because, I don't have a lot of savings. So if I lose my job, if I become unemployed, it's a big problem for me. I will actually have to think about how I will pay my rent or put food on the table. But in Finland, it doesn't matter if you're working as a janitor or if you're working as a manager of a company. So you are protected because you have some kind of safety that comes from the government. So I agree with you on this, like having this kind of positive emotions or having those feelings is important. And also, Finland and other Nordic countries, they always draw criticisms for this, like people who have visited there. They always say Finns and the Swedes or the Danes and the Norwegians, they kind of look very depressed and sad. If you go to Finland or Sweden and walk down the street in the capital or in any other cities, in any part of the country, then you will maybe see some people who do not express anything. Like it's kind of like they have become numb. So they don't have any emotion, they don't have any feelings because they have that kind of face. So yeah, I know it's a criticism that they have, that they don't express their emotions. But I think Finns also have accepted this kind of quiet satisfaction with their lives. What they say is that we may not smile a lot, we may not talk to people a lot. We are introvert. We are kind of socially withdrawn. But then we also have this kind of quiet satisfaction with our lives as we go on with our day-to-day business, because we know if we are in trouble, let's say if we become unemployed or if we become sick, if we are diagnosed with cancer, we won't be having big troubles in our life because at least we have some kind of support system from the government. So this is my opinion, that, you know, Finland, the other Nordic countries, people in their country, they not be very expressive, or, you know, they do not maybe enjoy and experience high positive emotions, but then they have this quiet satisfaction in their lives. So what do you think about it?
Yeah, I'm not going to dismiss the Finnish happiness. It is more grounded in that satisfaction, and I think the set of policies there are like amazing. Right, there's a lot to like celebrate in Finland, but I'm just trying to say is like emotions are important. Feeling good is important, and if we're talking about happiness and we want a rounded happiness, like it's important to think about the two. You know, if we're really talking about a country that does really well at this, like Costa Rica, right? For example,
you have written about Costa Rican happiness. I was reading your blog. So can you tell me about the Costa Rican? Because I really want to learn. You know what? Like, I do not know much about the Latin American countries, but I met some Spanish people in Finland. And one thing I have really loved about is the music. You know, it's very uplifting. It's very positive, and you know, it always puts me in a feeling that I want to dance when I listen to Spanish reggaeton or, you know, Latin American music. So the music is very uplifting. That's the only thing I know. And sometimes I listen to reggaeton music on YouTube. But you have traveled to Latin American countries and you have experienced it personally, as I have experienced the Finnish happiness. So I want to know from you about the Costa Rican Latin American happiness.
Latin American, I mean, I just found it very warm and friendly. Like I could very easily be cycling through a place and end up having lunch in the plaza. And like I just connect with someone and then be invited into their home to have dinner with their family or sleep in the garden the night or whatever it was. I just found them very warm and friendly people. And I guess Costa Rica specifically. Mexico was really nice. I found like there was a lot of warmth and friendliness in Mexico. Argentina was really amazing as well. But the only thing there is in Argentina, I was very head down, got to cycle really fast, and I didn't really notice how friendly it was. And it was only after like 10 months of being in Latin America when I really started, you know, slowing down and appreciating where I was. But Costa Rica is a really standout country. So I think, yeah, what you talk about there is social policies are really important, and knowing that, you know, you're looked after, protected if something goes wrong is really important. It kind of gives a peace of mind, certainly. And that's to be celebrated in the Nordic countries, which is a far cry from, say, the USA or the UK, which is less supportive. And I think we could learn a lot from there. And, North Europe, West Europe, it's, we could have similar policies in the UK, right? But I guess Costa Rica, they made some real substantive changes very early, like in the 50s and 60s, to basically, like, I think they abolished their army and basically invested in social policy and health and education, which is why they have, really high literacy rates. They have like high life expectancy, higher than the USA. They also have higher happiness, both positive emotions, emotional type of happiness, feelings, as well as life satisfaction, which is higher than the USA. And so they invested like in health and education. And in the 80s and 90s, they did a lot of protection for the environment. So what you got there is like a medium-sized economy, right? It's about, a quarter of the size of the US, that it still maintains good quality of life. So I just found that the people there are a lot more relaxed, willing to give the time, lots of space, and a real pride in it as well. So they have the concept pura vida, which means like the simple life or the pure life.
Oh yeah, pura vida. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like a celebration of like, we don't have much, and that's cool. That's enough. We don't need any more. And that's a good thing. It's like a celebration of enough, a celebration of sufficiency. Whereas you go to a lot of countries that are very stout capitalist countries, it's like, got to have more. There is no enough. It's just more. And, I think one thing this world desperately needs is some kind of concept of sufficiency. Because, if you look at, developed models of development, we're obtaining material needs, but we're busting the earth's biosystems to do it. So, like, what is enough? When will there be a point where it gets to enough? And we're not better meeting our population needs, but there are some countries that really, I think, stand out, and Costa Rica is definitely one of them. So yeah, does that satisfy your curiosity, or do you want to know more?
Oh, it satisfies my curiosity.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't really get into the music when I was going there, actually.
Oh, really? Oh my God, how did you miss that? The Spanish music is very uplifting, You always want to dance when you listen to it.
I went for a few salsa, salsa when they're playing some salsa music, but I can't dance salsa.
Me neither. I don't know how to dance salsa.
Yeah, I mean, I give stuff a go, and I like music. I love music, and I love dancing, but I couldn't get into the salsa.
Okay,
maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe next time. Yeah. So now talk about your grand journey to Bhutan, to my part of the world. So tell me about it.
Yeah, well, there I was. What was it? A decade of researching happiness. And I was like, okay, like A, I'm not very happy. And B, I'm really questioning the capacity of this research to actually make any meaningful change. Because the way I'm looking at it is, it's not really science that makes changes in this world. It's about stories. It's about our beliefs. But beliefs don't change through new scientific evidence. These beliefs they're ingrained deep. So what I wanted to do is basically, make myself happy, do something that was more fulfilling, but also tell a different story, actually bring people to the research through the story of the irony of an unhappy happiness researcher cycling to Bhutan, which is, as you know, or people listening to this don't know, is the only society in the world that focuses its entire national policy on happiness.
Oh yeah, they have the gross national happiness, GNH.
Gross national happiness. So you might be more familiar in Bangladesh. Some people I met when I was traveling had never heard of the place. So it's an opportunity for me to tell them, because people would ask, where are you going? I'm cycling to Bhutan. They'd be like, and for me, that embodied everything that I wanted my journey to be about, because not only did the destination have, this celebrated happiness nation at the end, but I was traveling there in a way that I was hoping would bring me more happiness in terms of meeting needs. Because I know that I've cycled a lot before. That's my only way I get around. I don't drive. Cycling for me is deeply connected. It connects me to the landscape, the nature. And I guarantee I'll pull up with like big bags on my bike in any place in the world. Someone will ask a question and, I can have conversations. It's like, beautiful way to travel. It's not too fast. It's quite a nice speed. So you get to take a lot of stuff in. So I wanted the journey there to be deep and meaningful and happiness inspiring as well. And so, I didn't know I was going to leave about 3 months before, and then like this person came into my life, and I was telling him about wanting to do something different, like make a journey or something which would have like lots of happiness, interesting countries involved. And he just said to me like, well, what if you were to tell people you were cycling to Bhutan? And I like cycling, but as soon as he said that, I was like, well, I'm not going to do that, because I have to go to Latin America. Latin America needs to be part of my journey, because I was very aware of how much people feel happiness there in terms of the happy, smiling type of happiness. So I really wanted to go there. That had to be an important part of my trip. Plus, as well, I wanted to learn a bit more Spanish. So I wanted to do that for personal reasons. So I knew I had to go that way. So originally I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then it just became clear to me, this is the journey. This is what I need to do. So I set out on that journey, and yeah, I was very meek and anxious ridden and scared. And I didn't know whether I'd ever get to Bhutan, to be honest. And even till like, I think it was 2 days before I even got to Bhutan, it was uncertain whether I'd make it to Bhutan, because I had a major mechanical issue in Siliguri, which you probably might be familiar with, which is in West Bengal.
Sorry, what did you say?
Siliguri? Is it Siliguri?
Siliguri. Oh yeah. That's the place, Siliguri.
So like 2 days before, I like had a major catastrophic mechanical issue. So it was always this like, am I ever going to get to Bhutan? And of course, happiness is not in the destination anyway. So it's always about the journey and how we take ourselves there. Achieving anything, it's short-lived. It's what we do along the way. So yeah, I made sure I connected deeply with myself and found a lot of great connections with people, had a good time, had a very painful, anguish time. But yeah, generally it felt really a deep, meaningful journey, really, which, I came back, 3 years ago now, and decided to write a book, and that book exists now.
Oh yeah, you published it through a crowdfund. I know.
Yeah, I did a crowdfund, which is again part of the journey, because like I think the thing that's important for me is it's all about connection and recognizing the interconnectedness of us all. And going through life without recognizing that and not celebrating our relationships and deepening our relationships with people, which is like, if you want to laugh and smile all the time, you got to have people. If you want to feel good about your life in terms of a satisfying kind of happiness, you got to have people. It's relationships are fundamental, and our connectedness. And essentially, the crowdfunder was just an extension of that, because all these people that have been following me were like, yeah, we want to see this book. And that was last year that I did the crowdfund, and the book just came out about a month ago, and
I think it's really doing well, because I see with tweets people are recommending the books, and they say they find the book insightful and entertaining, interesting. So yeah, I see it on Twitter that you are retweeting people's
tweets. There's lots of people.
Yeah,
there's some really good bunch of people out there that really did help me, and like I've got them all their books, so now like they know, and there's many of them have already read it, and I had some really positive comments, so it's been really nice. I mean, it's quite gritty, raw, and deep book. I mean, basically, like, it's a bit of research, it's a bit of journey, and then it's a lot of me. Because what I do is happiness is a journey, and I try and use my own process and experience to not only highlight research, but also to highlight what can we do, given this is our world and our environment that we have to find a way through. And hopefully, and this is what people told me, so it must be, is this a very relatable book, because we're all human beings. So I try and really get into that relatability of being a human who's out there trying something, which hopefully will bring a deeper fulfillment. And it did. So
yeah. I understand. And I can tell you, this is my opinion about your book. Like, there is the saying that facts tell, stories sell. So you have lived two lives. So you're a researcher, you research happiness for a very long time, and you have lots of academic papers. So you looked at happiness from the academic side. Then also you started the journey to Bhutan, which has actually inspired the United Nations, about this happiness thing. So I think they proposed to the United Nations to adopt this resolution on the World Happiness Report or something like that. And that's how actually it began. I don't exactly remember. But anyway, so Bhutan actually has a pioneering role in spreading the message of happiness all over the world. Yeah. And now we have that World Happiness Report. But anyway, so as I was telling you, because we have researched happiness from an academic point of view, and then you started this journey of happiness. So I think, as I said, facts tell, stories tell. When people will read your academic papers, they will, maybe find the same thing that other researchers have done. So it's kind of always like, if you have this, you have happiness. If you have this, you don't have happiness. These are the obstacles to happiness. And these are the things that are actually favorable to having more happiness. But when they will read your book, they will have a reflection of what it means to have happiness in real life and to go on a journey in search of happiness. Because I think in your book, you have written about your journey and you have written about your personal experiences. And people always want to know these stories, personal stories. These are so important in everyone's
Yeah.
life. And whenever I read a report about Finnish happiness, I mean, it doesn't touch me. But when I think about my time with my Finnish colleagues and the long discussions I had about happiness with them, those discussions actually inspire me to think more about Finnish happiness and different aspects of it.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you have made a difference as an academic, because most of the academic, they will keep researching, they will keep publishing papers, maybe they will have more research grants. But then again, you have researched happiness and then you started this journey because you're interested in knowing whether what you are producing as a researcher, as an academic, does actually apply or have an effect or have any effect in real life, because you're interested in that. Because if we are always reading about happiness, but if we don't experience it in our personal life, I mean, what is the point of reading? So
Yeah.
I think that's why, your work is very interesting, because you have these academic papers, and then again you have this book, which actually gives readers an explanation or a glimpse of your life and your journey and your cycle to Bhutan. So they can know a lot more about happiness when they read their book. So I would say that's really tremendous, and that's really amazing, because not many researchers have this kind of book written from their personal experience. Because I mean, maybe they never even wanted to cycle to Bhutan or some other places, or let's say Costa Rica, or Latin American countries, but you did it. I mean,
Yeah.
hey, I want to ask you the question: when you quit your job, I think in 2017 you quit your job as an
Yeah.
academic. So how difficult was it to make this big decision? I mean, if you have a job and if you have a stable career, I think you did as a researcher, but then you called it quits. So I want to know, how difficult was it emotionally, because it's a very big, it's a massive decision in your life.
Yeah.
So can you
Scary.
tell me about the emotional part of the decision making?
Yeah. Scary, I think. It's like I can go back to, talking about the podcast, right? Coming on before a podcast, I'm really nervous and anxious, right? And I do it because it's important and meaningful, right? It's something I want to do. It's good to do, right? It's the same thing, but on a much larger scale. It's like, what am I doing? It's like scary. Like, and we all experience these things, which sometimes that fear and anxiety can be so overwhelming. And it's pretty, my anxiety is pretty high as I go into the book. Like, I'm a fairly anxious being. But I guess what happened at the end, it was just like, I knew I had to do it. There's sometimes things come along in our lives, probably a lot more than we would like to admit, that we realize we have to do. It's like a calling. This is what I need to do. And I think it was so glaringly obvious to me that that's what I needed to do with my life from here on in, that I couldn't not do it. It was almost like the fear of like rejecting a clarity in terms of what I had to do was bigger. Like the regret and the remorse, and it would have been bigger than not doing it. So yeah, before I was going, I didn't know what was going to happen with me. I had to quit my job, quit my flat. Like I really liked Scotland. Scotland's a great, beautiful place to be. I didn't grow up here, but I came here and lived here for about 5 years. And then I decided I wanted to leave, but I always knew I was going to come back to Scotland. So, it was scary, really scary. Plus saying goodbye to people, I mean, I was out on my own for 18 months. I think I ran in, I had some people that I've met in the past along the way, and that was nice to stay with them, whether it be in the US or, in Asia. So you're there on your own, on this bicycle, and that's a scary proposition, and you don't know what's going to happen to you. Like, you hear stories about what happens to people who, do things, and it can put you off. But I guess I felt like this was important to do. So yeah, scary, really scary. And I think I talk about it quite a lot in the book because it's like this rawness of human emotions. Like the stuff you're going to find in that book is not something that you won't have experienced somewhat in yourself, about setting off on a journey. And I try and be open and real about it. So it was tough.
Yeah,
But
I understand.
and it doesn't, if you said, right, I've got to go on a big journey tomorrow, I'd feel the same stuff. And I'd find my way through it. I realized I'd have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, you had to do it because the calling was so big.
Yeah, it was.
You felt the emotion so strongly. You cared about it. You cared about it a lot. So there was no way you couldn't do it.
Yeah, I think it was a chance for deeper fulfillment. And at the end of the day, not taking that opportunity for deeper fulfillment, like deep fulfillment, like it's a recipe for regret, really.
Yeah.
And I was lucky, and I want to also say that I was lucky enough to be in circumstances, to be in a country, to be, in a situation, in a good enough job where I'd saved enough cash to be able to do that. Because a lot of people have really rough situations and they're stuck, which is why, when you talked about Finland and its support of its people, right? That's really useful, So to come from Finland, you're given way more opportunities and more capacity to do such things, So I'm recognizing my privilege in being able to do that, But then I wouldn't say that undermines the journey, because I guess what I talk about is that we've all got our journeys, and it's not about going to obscure countries on a bicycle. It might just be something, which may seem small in comparison, but actually for that person, where they are in their life is actually massive. Like I can talk about, I remember this one time when I never really was around nature. I grew up in a very urban environment, right? And I remember this time I was in my 20s and I'd never run up a hill before in my life. And I happened to be in this really beautiful natural park and I was doing this work type thing. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to put on my running shoes and run up the hill. And at that point in my life, it was kind of almost like going to Bhutan, because I was really scared and nervous and I had to overcome the same things. And in that moment, that was my journey. That was like, I'm getting to the top. It was amazing at the top because I'd never been up top of a mountain before, but it was amazing. But sometimes you can get to the top of a mountain, it's really cloudy. And, that's why you got to enjoy the way up. The way you go there has to be fulfilling. And I guess what, ultimately this book gets into is that it's the way we go there. It doesn't matter where you're going. It's how are you traveling? How are you engaging with the world and the people around you? You do it in a heartfelt, open, honest, real way. And if you are, you'll do well.
I understand. So I have like 6 or 7 minutes before the program ends. So I have one last question for you. What happiness lessons can we learn from Bhutan or other countries that prioritize citizens' well-being over high economic growth?
What can we learn? I think the thing is I'm curious about Bhutan is far removed from UK. It's very different. So I don't know if there's something that could be learned, but what I think is that there's something to be inspired by, So Bhutan is subsistence economy, people, basically tilling the land, creating their own food. It's not like the UK in any way, in any shape or form, right? But what I like there is that the way they're orientating and structuring their society. And if we were to do that in the UK or any other country which has more than met their material needs, then like the world would look a very different place. This would be a lot friendlier place, calmer place. So that's what I think Bhutan holds for me, is that inspiration. And I also so the kind of happiness that they celebrate in Bhutan isn't the feeling kind, like the happiness and smiling, because I didn't think they were that happy and smiling personally. I didn't get that much connection, although I had some lovely guides there and, had a really beautiful time there. And they also don't do very well at the evaluative type of, like Finnish type of happiness. But they do And I don't think they do particularly well, but they kind of created their own notion of happiness and what's important to Bhutanese people. And I would say it's more based in a kind of human flourishing or thriving type of happiness. And it is subsistence economy, so there is struggle to meet material needs there, and it's got a lot of work to do. So I'm not having any grand illusions in terms of Bhutan as being like the sacred place where it's all happiness there, because it's not like that at all. And I think often people get lost in thinking it is. It's a country and it's got its own struggles, like any country. But in terms of like a model of development, I mean, yeah, it's got it going on. It's inspiring, and I'd like to see, other countries take lesson, take heed. And there is some indication that countries are, but not very quickly. It's still the economy. That's what rules.
Yeah, I understand. I think one of the main things that Bhutanese can teach the world or other countries is that you don't actually have to copy others to have high happiness levels. You know what I mean? I think this is the lesson we can get from Bhutan, that you can do things in your own way, because that will produce happiness for you. Because, I think happiness will be different in different areas of the world because of the geographical, cultural, religious, or, other kinds of differences. But if you have found something that really works for you, and if you have found something, I want to say, that actually helps with the eudaimonic kind of happiness, because I'm really interested in that personally. And I think that's kind of more sustaining. And also you agreed today. So that's kind of more fulfilling and more sustainable. So I think Bhutan is actually showing the world that this is how you can happiness. You don't have to be a rich country necessarily, not necessarily. You don't have to be a very wealthy country. But then again, you can have this kind of happiness in your citizens' minds, and they can be really satisfied with their lives, that they don't have a lot, but still they're happy because they know how to be happy with a lot less compared to other countries.
I would say that as well. Like, it shows that you can find your own way. But I also think there's other countries who do that well, Costa Rica being one of them. I would say the Nordic countries as well, their social model. It's like they're not playing like the North American drum, of like consume, grow, because that feels to me like that's coming from there, and everyone plays that. Everyone dances along to their own detriment a lot of the time. So yeah, Costa Rica, New Zealand, Nordic countries, there are pockets, and also just getting down into local community stuff. Like that's where all the real pioneering stuff will always happen, out in the local community. Which is why I work in the community now.
Yeah. I actually read it on your blog. But anyway, Christopher, it was really a great discussion with you, and now I have to, wrap up the meeting. Say goodbye to you. But anyway, maybe we'll have a long chat some other times. But I really enjoyed talking to you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to interview you. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for asking. I'm really pleased when someone gets an email and said, "Hey, I'm interested in what you do." Great, it's connection, Yeah,
it's connection. Yeah, exactly.
It's good to chat to you, Mahmoud.
Yeah. We'll stay in touch. So goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.